the overnight news, not on the front pages, is that the trade war is underway. The tariffs from America, from Trump on steel, are hitting all around the world, including Britain. And at 4 a.m, the UK announced its response. As I said, we are in a trade war. Stock market's falling. Potentially a recession in America, which will affect all of us. The Canadians are fighting back. The Europeans fighting back with retaliatory tariffs. The UK announcement at 4 a.m. is that we are upset. But we're not going to do anything. We're going to have a negotiation.
Disappointed was the word.
Waving the white hanky of surrender.
Right. Is it the white hanky of surrender, or is it a clever long-term game from Starmer to get a good deal from Trump?
Yeah, come on. If you show weakness, he'll exploit it. He'll walk all over you. We've seen that time after time after time. And I understand there's complications with Ukraine. Doesn't want to get on the wrong side of him there, but you might give him a state visit, prostitute King Charles, and he's still going to impose you with the tariffs. Look, it's our second biggest steel export market after the EU. We export £400 million worth of steel to the US. It's now going to be an extra £100 million cost on that. You've got to take retaliatory tariffs, otherwise you risk getting more in the future. When we were in the EU and Trump played this first time round, put on tariffs on Harley-Davidsons, Jack Daniels, Levi's, big name, iconic US brands. And in the end, it kind of was a lot of pushing and shoving and reach some type of deal. But you can't just lie down and be walked all over by Trump. It's the wrong tactic.
One of the reasons that we were coming out of the EU and doing Brexit was so that we could strike an incredible new deal with the United States. How's that working out currently?
Not well.
No, we don't have one, do we?
Not the prospect. But, you see, that's part of why I think staying Starmer's hand, because he does want to try and strike a trade deal, and he thinks having the state visit with the president, soft power, might make it more likely. Because if he gets a trade deal, that would be pretty big for Britain.
Are people going to say, well done, Keir Starmer, you're a statesman, you're playing the long game, these Canadians, these Europeans, they're all...
They're going to say he's kowtowing again to the President of the United States, kowtowing. And a lot of people think he's been kowtowing since that extraordinary...
Will the Tories come out and say that we should be tougher?
Well, I think they should.
They will.
Well, they're in opposition, they've got nothing to lose. Say so.
Their post-Brexit trade deals were bad for Britain. And New Zealand and Australia, their farmers won at the cost of ours. And, in fact, George Eustace, who was the Environment Secretary when they negotiated them, afterwards, when he lost his job, was honest and said, we're just... Because we're outside the EU, we're desperate for trade deals. People elsewhere know we're desperate, so they're taking advantage. And that's what Trump will do. He will take advantage, and Starmer has shown weakness from the off.
A week ago, though, people were saying Starmer doing really well, praised by all sides, his handling of Trump and that meeting, sorting out Ukraine. I mean, is he being strong and the negotiator of the bridge, or does it in the end become being weak in the face of a bully?
I think he handled him well because he knew flattery would work, and he has this odd bromance when their politics are very different. And some of that is around issues like using the royal family, which sticks in my throat as a Republican, I will admit. But you can't just say, and yes, 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 yes. Sometimes you have to say no. And
of course, it's part of the problem. You're never quite sure if this is something that President Trump's going to stick to.
Well, yesterday he was raising tariffs, doubling the tariffs for Canadian steel to 50%. That lasted about 5 hours.
And why did it...
By the way, if they had stuck at 50%, I think that the idea of a state visit here, when the King's second territory is Canada, would have made it would have been impossible.
But why did he back off? It's because in the earlier battle over tariffs, the US imposing them on Canada coming back. Canada
they did hit back.
Exactly.
Hard.
So you have to
the new Prime Minister of Canada said, we'll meet you eye for an eye.
It was quite interesting because the decision to put them up to 50%, is massive, was announced by Trump on his own social media.
Yeah, I know, extraordinary.
Just the president just announces it, and then a few hours later, it is true that the Canadians said that they were not going to do this electricity thing. Trump backs down. The Commerce Secretary in America basically said...
When you say the electricity thing, you mean that Canada was then going to charge America much higher prices for the electricity that it supplies to the States.
So the Canadians threaten, and then in the end, the Canadians and the Americans both withdraw from that big confrontation. And the Commerce Secretary in America basically says a version of sanity has prevailed. Yeah. And you wonder what, you know, what's he referring to there? I mean, after my president's insane tweets, at least we're back on track. I mean, it's amazing.
And look at the impact on the stock market. People think it doesn't matter, it doesn't affect me. It does. Yeah. When your stock markets are in retreat, that affects your pension.
British jobs will be affected by this in the steel industry.
The stock market's going to melt down.
But having Trump as president, it's like watching Father Ted and seeing Father Jack, the drunken, sweary priest in the corner, and drink, 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 and swearing, and they have to calm him down every now and again. And
of course, the irony is, of course, he's a teetotal president.
Can you imagine? Well, maybe he should take to drink to calm him down.
We will talk to the Exchequer Secretary to the Treasury about that at 8:30 this morning, but I want to focus our attention on something which I imagine upset everybody yesterday, and this was the sentencing of Kyle Clifford, who murdered Carol Hunt, Louise Hunt and Hannah Hunt, simply because Louise had ended their relationship. He got 3 whole-life sentences, which I think everybody would say is absolutely
He'll
the
die
right.
in prison.
He will never be released from prison. Never. 3 times over. But the thing is, he didn't turn up in court to hear the sentence, and the judge had considered whether he should be forced to do so. Mr Justice Benathan said the defendant was asked to attend here or on the video link and refused. I then had an inquiry from Belmarsh as to whether I would order restraints, so he should be brought to the video room. I have declined on the basis that the idea of a man in a wheelchair being put in restraints and potentially disrupting these proceedings is simply not appropriate or suitable. If the defendant lacks the courage to face today, so be it. He goes on, I'm conscious part of this morning will be people paying tribute to the 3 women who died, and I'm not having that disrupted by anything.
But we know that the husband, the dad...
John Hunt,
who made that incredibly powerful, passionate, emotional statement, wanted to be able to deliver it while he was in the room, eye to eye. And I'm afraid, look, we had the last government, the Tory government, said in August 2023 they were going to get this sorted out. As recently as January, Shabana Mahmood, the Justice Secretary, said she was going to change the law to sort this out. It isn't rocket science. It's not difficult. And, look, this guy's got a whole life sentence.
The judges say it is difficult. The judges say that they will disrupt the court, will be offensive to victims. I'm not going to have some guy who, in the end, would scream and shout and have to be, in this case, carried out.
Gag them. Gag them.
See,
look, I'm sorry. This is a brutal murderer who should have been in court to hear the witness statement, to hear the impact statement. If he starts shouting and screaming, gag him or her. Sorry, is that undignified? Too bad. They're a brutal murderer.
The Daily Mirror ran a campaign to require the guilty to be there to hear their sentence, the judge's remarks and the impact statements from their victims. But there is this problem, and I side with the judge here. And you read what John Hunt said and his daughter, his surviving daughter, and your heart is moved, and you're in awe at their strength. It's about getting through this. But you can say gag them, chain them to the wheelchair. Does that really? Would John Hunt actually? I don't know.
Well, the other thing I would say,
would he want that? And of course, judges, if people are disorderly in their courtrooms, kick them out. Well, this coward. This misogynist, this Andrew Tate listening, horrible, violent...
You watched Andrew Tate video the night before the murders.
Is going to spend every day of his life in that wheelchair in prison. If there weren't whole-life tariffs, I would agree, you don't go to court, you get an extension to your sentence.
Right. So
I would agree to that.
But what you can do if they've got a whole-life sentence, you say, you're looking forward to your visitors, are you? You're not getting any.
So that's interesting you say that, Andrew, because
no visitors.
Cheryl Corbell, whose daughter, Olivia, was murdered, shot, Liverpool, she has been in touch with us along with her sister, Antonia, because we approached her yesterday because she runs this campaign to force defendants to be in court because her daughter's murderer refused to attend court as well.
Gutless.
If the families do not wish for the defendant to be in court, they say, then ensure they're in a cell with a TV monitor and they must still listen to the statements and judges' remarks. That is, I think everybody would back that.
Absolutely.
I agree. With only a one-way camera.
Exactly.
For those in the,
so
if
no
they're
disruption
laughing,
via video link.
If they're laughing or pulling faces or whatever, you don't see that back, but they have to hear. If they,
and the
they
volume
put their
very
fingers,
loud.
They put their fingers in their ears and want to go la la la. You don't see that. And what happens time after time is people behave in this most appalling way. But at some point, he will have to hear that mass murderer, that killer of 3 women, will have to hear and read and know. That's what will happen in prison, and he'll be condemned forever because it was utterly cowardly. But it's not unexpected from someone who did what he did.
Yeah.
There's an alternative thing you could do. The judge could sentence and then require there to be, at some point, a hearing where the families hear and also give their testimony to him, and to say that that must happen over a period of years, and at the point where everybody agrees it's the right time, do it. But until that happens, as you say, any kind of privileges for him are suspended.
All privileges are removed.
Because it might be that the ego on the day of sentencing would get in the way and upstage and be terrible, but after a period of time, you might be willing to listen.
Yeah. But if you're not going to get any visitors, very little free, you're going to be solitary confinement.
I'm all for making them here. I'm all for that. But I think there are cases where if you drag him into court, I don't think it would look good for British justice to have somebody's mouth taped and somehow in an orange restraining suit. I've got no sympathy for...
It would mean that John Hunt's testimony would be upstaged by this...
Yeah, I've got no sympathy for the murderer. He deserves everything he's going to get.
Yeah, but we don't...
A terrible life, as John Hunt said, and then face it.
The cameras don't see the guilty party in the dock. The cameras don't see it. So he or she can perform as much as they like, but the cameras won't see it.
But
the families see it.
So there is new legislation, which was announced in the King's speech, which would give more powers to judges to make criminals attend sentencing. And that would be the power to order an offender on face up to 2 more years locked up if they refuse without a reasonable excuse. So, of course, that would make no difference whatsoever to somebody who has a whole life order,
and
or
even
someone who has a minimum
30 years.
52 years in the case of the Axel Ruda Cabana, the Southport killer. So Cheryl Corbell and her sister Antonia say a proposal of an additional 24 months added to a sentence is ludicrous to someone facing a life sentence or a sentence of 20+ years. We propose their visitation rights to be revoked for 12 months.
There we are, very good.
Or even 24 months. And she points out, they don't get to visit their loved one. We only get to visit our loved ones in a cemetery.
It was the Cheryl Corbell case in Liverpool, because when her daughter was killed by a hitman who was going after somebody else who ran through the house, and then they opened the door and the poor, dreadful, was killed. I'll go along with 12 or 24 months of no visitation rights, but I'm not sure. And people are pleading guilty to crimes they're found guilty of, and they're not facing up to what they did. Whether that would have
We've got to try
an impact. No, I think you need a series of sanctions, because the guilty should be made to hear the sentence. It used to be routine. I'd love to see figures, because I can't remember in my court reporting days and that people would refuse to go into the dock. They went into the dock. It was all part of the process.
Yeah.
Well, at what point did people begin to say, we're not going in the dock?
I can remember when one of these cases came up, there was a letter in the Times from the son of a former High Court judge who said, my father had a simple decision. They're not coming to the dock. Put them in chains.
Look, it all, as you say, the horrible indignity of that could distract from the grief and the dignity of the families. And John Hunt's words were so powerful yesterday, because he said, when I was first invited to provide a victim impact statement, I misunderstood its purpose. Do I really need to detail the impact of having 3/4 of my family murdered? But then I realised this was my final opportunity to say what I wanted to say, specifically to you, Kyle, words that will also be directed to your family, who will carry guilt forwards with them for the rest of their lives. They knew about the weapons. They knew. The screams of hell, Kyle, I can hear them faintly now. The red carpet will come out for you. At that point, when the person you could have been meets the person you are, you will realise your miserable fate will last for eternity.
Powerful words. Extraordinary.
Unbelievable dignity and power in
and the
that
surviving
moment.
daughter spoke beautifully too.
My goodness.
Thank God they've got each other.
And the tribute he paid to Louise, and said that she would give courage to other women who, when they've ended a relationship and feel it's enough, it is enough. Yeah. And the tribute he paid to Hannah, who was able to make that 999 call, and says that she saved his life. And the tribute he paid to the compassion of his wife. Oh, my goodness, he was just... He and his Amy...
But when you hear those words,
incredible.
But what you realise is that however much you read about the case and follow the trial, it's impossible, actually, to fully understand the reality of what he's gone through. And it's sort of, you know, it's so unimaginable.
It's like he survived a nuclear explosion in his kitchen.
But you
It's
try...
for no reason. There's no explanation other than just evil.
Jealousy and self-pity.
You attempt to empathise and walk in or live in other people's shoes, but you can't. I suspect the only other people who might get close are those who've suffered a similar fate and have had their loved ones murdered in such a brutal way. But you've got family, though. You've got a family that's incredibly decent.
Yes.
And then you've got this scumbag, this vile, evil murderer, this misogynist.
It's just a family.
They are worlds apart. They inhabited different worlds.
Yeah.
And it's because Mum was so decent. She let him into the house because he'd come to apparently pick up some clothes or something, some lie he confected. Yeah. She was just being so decent.
It's absolutely shocking. And we are going to... You say, of course, you know, we can only imagine ourselves in that situation. We're going to be talking about, discussing whether killers should be forced to hear their sentencing and forced to come to court. We're actually going to be speaking to Jebina Islam. Now, Jebina's sister, Sabina, was murdered in 2021 and her killer refused to come to the sentencing. So, you know, she knows exactly how it feels.
Goodness. Oh, well. Another story which is we've also been following on this programme, as we have this issue of the convicted hearing their sentences, is around leave for miscarriages.
Yes, so the government says it now supports paid bereavement leave for couples who experience a miscarriage. The Business Minister, Justin Madders, told MPs he fully accepts this principle. Currently, employees are eligible for parental bereavement leave if they or their partner have a stillbirth after 24 weeks of pregnancy. But here on this programme, the Labour MP Sarah Owen, chair of the Women and Equalities Committee, was calling for this right to be extended in cases where miscarriages take place before 24 weeks, and is backed by Mylene Class, who spoke on this programme as well.
People do feel we need this change. It's integral to looking after both the women and the family's mental health. How can you dismiss the loss of a child as in the same bracket or the same arena as someone having a common cold and just needing to go and see a GP? There has been a baby lost, and that should be acknowledged.
Mylene suffered 4 miscarriages, and incredibly powerful campaigning by Mylene and the chair of the Equalities Commission. And it's worked.
In fact, we hear the minister announcing his response, which we were encouraging them to go after. I mean, I have to say, I wasn't expecting the government to give ground on this. I thought that they would be worried about, like, the burdens on business argument around this employment bill. But in fact, they're going to put an amendment. So it shows speaking up makes a difference.
Yes, it does.
It does.
Are they saying at what point it kicks in, or is it any time?
Well,
because a lot of miscarriages are very early on.
They are. That's right. And so it just says currently, Sarah Owen had been calling for the right to be extended in cases where miscarriages take place before 24 weeks. So I expect we'll get the detail of when.
Yeah, it may be 12 to 20.
Yes.
24.
Yeah.
You know, I'm always wary. I don't want to mansplain on this, but it's not the same as having an upset stomach if you've had had a miscarriage, so you could have time off. And then, of course, you want your partner to be, the woman will want their partner to be there too, and the partner will probably want to be because they've suffered too. But it's where the law's catching up, because it was the case that if you had a miscarriage or a stillbirth, it was just almost pushed to one side, and now people can get certificates that they had a baby that died before the completion of the term and birth and so on. I think that's really right. And it's kind of when you stop and think about it, you think, why wasn't the law changed some time ago? Why has it taken us 2025 to get
probably because
this
the question Andrew raises is tough, and actually making sure that you get this right in a way which is correct. It will be difficult, but the government says they're going to come forward now with an amendment to this new legislation, so they're going to have to get that sorted out, and they'll have to answer your question.
Yeah.
I don't think it's that tough, Ed. I think you can just,
Well, it'll be... I can see that there might be some sensitivities around proving and asking for proof, and women feeling very distressed by being asked for proof. They haven't yet been to a doctor.
And there is a cost to the employer of all leave, and then do you get compensated? I accept that, but if you can have it for lots of other sickness and whatever, I can't see why you can't have it.
They just have to kind of get the rules to work in every case, and as long as they can sort that out, then it's really good.
But incredibly powerful campaigning, Sarah Owen and Mylene Class on that, and we're grateful for them speaking so openly on this programme about that, because that, a lot of women will feel that very keenly. Social media, more rules coming in. Parents are to be given the ability to block teenagers from using TikTok during specific times, such as family meals, school, during a holiday, or at night. Until now, TikTok has enabled parents to set screen time allowances, but not specific schedules during the day. And there's going to be a wind-down mindfulness tool, which will automatically turn on if teens are on the app after 10 o'clock at night. I wish your phone would just turn off at 10 o'clock at night. I just wish there would be a sort of... across everybody's phone, they would just turn off, so you weren't tempted to look at it overnight.
As a parent, the one thing, if I could rewind and be a parent again, all my kids are 20s and 30s, is I would take away their phones in the evening when they go to bed. We banned TVs in their bedrooms, but left them with laptops, tablets and phones.
Exactly.
I mean, when I look back, I think, how could I be so stupid?
And you have to do it for the first child when they get their first phone. Because once you work out it's a good idea, but we had this, and your younger child says, well, look, that's not fair because my older brother and sister were allowed to have their phone in their bedroom. So one of those things, it's one of those things which you don't ever get taught, but as a parent, you need to know what you're going to do from the start.
We have a rule that if we're all... And I cook dinner for my kids every evening, and at the dinner table for the family meal, no one is allowed to go on their phone. And there's always a reason, isn't there? People will go, oh, can I just check that? Can I just check my calendar? Can I check that? There's always a reason. No. The answer is no. When the family meal... You see, the thing is... Last night, I was out yesterday evening, so unfortunately, who knows what they were doing at the kitchen table.
They were probably on their phone. They'd have been on their phone.
They were having nuggets in the air fryer.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a man-free fortnight. Let's get them out.
So maybe I should update to that too. The rule is when I'm there. Because, of course, when I'm not there...
I made chicken tikka masala with coconut milk.
Oh, lovely. And are they allowed on their phones when you're at the table?
Definitely not. Although a vet's a nightmare. But I say you can't, but she says it's important. I say it's not that important.
Well, she wants to be able to use the phone during dinner in case the Prime Minister calls.
Exactly.
Frankly,
Prime Minister can wait for your chicken tikka masala.
So there's a great terrorism plot. You can't file it for 30 minutes. I've got to have my strawberry pavlova.
I could say to her, Susanna would not tolerate that. So,
the government is falling. Sorry, Prime Minister, I've got to eat my chicken tikka masala.
Cheryl Corbell, the mum of 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Corbell, who was murdered when she was shot in her own home by a gunman as he chased a drug dealer, has told this programme she will stop at nothing to ensure criminals face the families whose lives they've destroyed in court.
A renewed cause come after Kyle Clifford, who murdered former girlfriend Louise Hunt, her sister Hannah and their mother Carol, refused to enter the dock yesterday as he was given a whole life prison sentence.
Ahead of his sentencing, the victim's father and husband, John Hunt, delivered a powerful statement saying, I so wanted to deliver these words eye to eye with Kyle. I will continue to act as if I am doing so. I simply say that you are a psychopath who, for the duration of your time together with Louise, was able to disguise yourself as an ordinary human being.
John added, the screams of hell, Kyle, I can hear them faintly now. The red carpet will come out for you. We're joined now by Jebina Islam, sister of Jebina Nessa, whose killer refused to attend his sentence hearing, and also legal affairs commentator Joshua Rosenberg. Jebina, we were saying earlier that it's impossible for us to understand what John Hunt, his daughter Amy, have gone through, and also that moment in the court when Kyle Clifford refuses to attend. But of course, you do know what that is like. Not the horror of losing your sister, but also the affront of the sentence killer refusing to attend. Tell us about that.
I think, coming from the family's perspective, it was just a kick in the teeth. The fact that you've committed such a horrible crime, you killed my sister, and the fact that you're not facing up to the crime that you did. And I wanted him to hear my victim impact statement about how much hurt, how he's just torn our family apart because of his horrendous crimes.
Your lovely sister was a primary school teacher. She was murdered in September 2021 by a man who had been spurned by his wife and travelled to London in order to assault and murder a woman.
Yes.
Absolutely horrific. I imagine that when you heard about the case of Kyle Clifford and what he did to Louise and to her sister Hannah and to their lovely mum, you must have felt a sense of it's happening all over again.
I think I felt anger because we're seeing a cycle now of these people are refusing to come to court. Like, this is a little cycle now. If we don't get this in place now, the law to change, then I think we're just going to carry on seeing this happening all the time now.
What would it have meant? We heard from John Hunt yesterday. He wanted to say eye to eye to the man responsible for destroying his family. He wanted to basically tell him, hell is going to roll out the red carpet for you, and I can hear the screams now, faintly in the distance. It was chilling for anyone listening. Kyle Clifford did not appear. Your sister's killer did not appear. What difference would it have made if he had?
I think for us as a family, we would have had a little bit of justice. The fact that he's made to come to court and the fact that he doesn't have an option. And the fact that he had the option, it felt like the justice system was on their side.
So it feels in a way like in that moment when he should be feeling the full weight of justice, he's kind of scored a win.
Yeah, 100%.
He's got one over on the justice system.
Yeah. It's just not fair. It's a kick in the teeth for the families. And like I've said, I wanted to read my impact statement to show him and hear what he's caused me and my family.
Joshua Rosenberg, you've been for very many years following trials like this, sentencing, but also this particular debate. The judge, Justice Benethan, explained yesterday to the court that HMP Belmarsh had offered to make Clifford follow proceedings from a video link. But the judge said he declined the offer on the basis that the idea of a man in a wheelchair being put in restraints and potentially disrupting these proceedings is simply not appropriate or suitable. He said if the defendant lacks the courage to face today, so be it. Explain to us what will have been in the judge's mind when he said those words, because it's clearly not what the families, the victims want to hear from the judge, as we heard from Jebina, that they want them to be there to hear their testimony.
They do, and everybody has sympathy with what you were saying. Nobody can imagine what it's like to be in your position. But the judge has seen cases before. This judge is an experienced criminal judge, Mr. Justice Ben Nathan, and he has seen defendants in the dock being disruptive. And the only thing a judge can do in those circumstances is order the defendant to be taken down to the cells. And you then hear the guy shouting and screaming as he's dragged out of the courtroom. And judges take the view that this would be even more distressing for the victims. Now, the victims and their families say, no, no, I want to see that man in that dock. But the judge has to consider how the trial is going to be handled, the dignity of the court, and the fact that if somebody is shouting and screaming and spitting and swearing and perhaps even hitting out at the dock officers who are there to restrain that defendant, then the judge loses control of the trial, everybody is deeply distressed. And in those circumstances, the judge, who will ultimately have the last word, even if the proposed legislation goes through, may well decide that for the dignity of the court and for the respect that is owed to the victims and their families, that the absence of the defendant is better than a shouting and screaming defendant.
Jebina, what do you make of that? I mean, if the convicted killer in your sister's case had been disruptive, but had been forced to come to court, perhaps in handcuffs, shackles. I mean, Andrew Pearce from the Daily Mail earlier was saying gag them, you know, sort of so that they can't make any kind of verbal outburst. You're a dignified woman who wants to issue a powerful impact statement. Is there a danger that that would distract?
I think, obviously, like you said, it can be quite distressing to hear them shouting and screaming. But I think as a family, we want them to come to court to just hear us out, because you've committed the crime, hear the family out. And we just need some sort of change. And, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, so Joshua, so obviously a disruptive, aggressive, unpleasant defendant, convicted criminal, is going to destroy the dignity of the court. But what about if you force them by saying, we're going to add 2 years to your sentence, which is the proposal in the King's Speech, or if they've got a whole life order and they don't care about an extra 2 years because it's not going to make any difference at all, you withdraw visitation rights for a year or even 6 months. I mean, I can imagine that would have a massive impact. These people have not got much left. What they have got left is contact with their families.
It's up to the prison service to decide how to handle prisoners. And there may be circumstances in which the prison service wants to give privileges to prisoners in order that they are going to be able to come to terms with their sentence and be manageable within prisons.
And the judge can't override that in the sentencing?
That's right. We don't give the judges the powers to direct the prison service as to how they look after those prisoners, because that's a day-to-day decision for the prison governor. Now, yes...
Although, if the law is to be changed, it could be changed to give it, in this unusual case, that power?
Well, it could be, and that's a matter for Parliament.
That's the proposal by Cheryl Corbell.
Well, it's something obviously worth considering, but it's very difficult for a judge to be able to say how the prison governor should manage a particular prisoner who's going to be moved from prison to prison to lay down a sentencing plan for that prisoner. The powers of the court are to send people to prison, obviously in other circumstances, non-custodial sentences. We don't give the judges the power to decide how that sentence is served.
Jebina, would you support that? Either an addition to the sentence, which is the current proposal, or withdrawal of visitation rights?
I'm for it. So either way, I think families need to be at the forefront of the justice system and we should be put first.
Now, Joshua, I just want to ask about something else that Cheryl Corbell has said in her statement to us this morning. If the families do not wish for the defendant to be in the dock, so basically give it the choice to the families, they don't want disruption, but they do want the defendant to hear their comments, ensure they are in a cell with a TV monitor and they must still listen to the statements and judges' remarks. I think a lot of people will be surprised that that's not the current case.
How do you force somebody to listen? How do you stop them putting their fingers in their ears?
OK, I understand that, but you put the sentencing on a TV monitor, you put them in the room with the TV monitor, it's up to them how they behave, but at least no one's seeing how they behave. How else do they... I mean, is it just communicated to them by the prison officers, this is your sentence? Why aren't they forced to listen to the impact statements?
Obviously, they are sent the judge's sentencing remarks, and they will be sent the victim impact statements. And this man, Kyle Clifford, has got the rest of his life to read those documents. And obviously people will tell him He's very well aware of what was said in court yesterday, I'm sure. So he will know about that. The question about whether you're in a cell and whether you can be seen or whether you shouldn't be seen is a very interesting thing, because after all, it is the families who actually want to see the defendant listening to this. So there's no point in saying, we can't see that defendant. And, of course, you're saying that the defendant should see the judge. Well, yes, the defendant should. The defendant should be in court. But what do you do? Simply piping this information into a cell and putting the volume up loudly, I don't think is the way to do it.
Yeah, that's again, it's one of the proposals from Cheryl Corbell and Jebina. I mean, I think it's eminently sensible.
Yeah, and I think not many people have realised that these animals had the option to come to court or not. So obviously now, let's just get the ball rolling and think it's time to get the law.
It's hard, isn't it? Because it feels as though in that moment of sentencing, power is handed to the individual to not be there, and you don't want them to have that power.
Yeah.
And clearly the power to disrupt is also bad, but actually, you know, I don't know whether Clifford was at the court or whether he was at Belmarsh.
He was at prison.
Actually, you sort of think, well, I mean, even if he's not going to be, he should be there.
He
should know. And if in the end he doesn't come in because he can't behave, I mean, that be something we own rather than him.
Yeah, it's just absurd.
It is, and I imagine it has been very upsetting for you, what's happened.
Yeah.
But we are very grateful to you for coming and sharing your experience, and to Cheryl Corbell as well, because, you know, the victims' families are not being heard,
100%.
are they?
No,
thank you, Joshua. Thank you very much indeed.
Britain's leading skin experts are warning against a dangerous new trend of tanning nasal sprays, which could contain unregulated, potentially dangerous chemicals.
Yes, Edith Eagle is urging people to think twice before using the sprays. She says she suffered a severe allergic reaction, which left her in hospital unable to breathe.
And Edith joins us now alongside Dr Emma Wedgworth, who's a consultant dermatologist on Harley Street, spokesperson for the British Skin Foundation.
Welcome both.
Thank you.
Edith.
Yes.
You bought this online.
Yes, I did.
You then used it for 3 days.
Yeah.
And what happened?
Well, I woke up in the morning and I had really swollen face and neck and I couldn't barely breathe. So when I got up, looked in the mirror, I went back to bed straight away and I said to my family, don't speak to me because I cannot breathe. So I was just concentrating on breathing, basically.
Yeah. How did you find out about the idea that if you put a spray up your nose, it might change the colour of your skin? I'd never heard of this before.
Nor did I, actually, until just before the holiday that we went on. Someone close to me told me about it, and we thought it's a brilliant idea. Why not?
Did you research it?
I just looked on Google and bought it online, and I had no idea this would be ending up like this.
So you have this... You didn't know at the time it was an allergic reaction, presumably. You just knew you couldn't breathe. What did you do?
I couldn't breathe and I couldn't see out of my eyes properly. And my neck and face was really, really badly swollen. So I took a taxi to the hospital while on holiday. And there was a long queue there, unfortunately, for them. They had to wait, but they let me straight in. Just as I put my sunglasses up to show the receptionist, she rushed me straight through and they put me on medication, steroids and antihistamines.
Because you were presumably... Was it diagnosed as anaphylaxis?
Yes, it was, yeah.
Which is a life-threatening condition.
Yes, but at the time we didn't know why that was at all.
Dr Wedgworth, this substance, which I think caused this reaction, which is called melanotan. This is illegal in the UK under the regulations to be used in a medicine, but apparently if you use it cosmetically, then that's OK. That seems like a ridiculous loophole.
I think it just falls between the cracks, to be honest. I think these sorts of things are not regulated because they're not widely available in the UK. I mean, in fact, if you are using a nasal spray, either that's really a medical device or it is a type of medicine because it can get absorbed into the rest of your bloodstream, which is why it can produce pigmentation.
So it shouldn't be being sold at all, even as a cosmetic?
It shouldn't really be being sold, but unfortunately legislation can't cover absolutely everything in terms of that.
Can I just ask, because I'm not going to judge Edith for wanting a tan and wanting a safe tan, because we know there are dangers if you lie out and overexpose yourself to the sun, right? I am a massive fan of fake tan. So what is the difference between rubbing something on your skin, which turns it a certain colour, and then putting something up your nose? Chemically, what's the difference?
So fake tan contains an ingredient which reacts with the outer surface of your skin. It doesn't actually penetrate internally. It's a chemical reaction which produces that sort of orangey, yellow and brown colour.
So it's not just a paint?
Layer.
It's not just painted on?
No, it reacts with a particular type of protein within your skin, but that's just on the outside of your skin.
Well, so it's safe.
Exactly. Whereas with something like melanotan, what's happening is that it's stimulating your pigment-producing hormone, something called MSH. And that reacts with your pigment cells to produce melanin. That's happening, a chemical reaction within your body.
Does it work?
It can work. It does need UV exposure to actually make it happen. So you can't just take the melanotan and then get brown. What you have to then do is go into the sun, and it really intensifies the amount of pigment that you get, and it can sometimes prolong it. But it has all sorts of really significant side effects. So this is not something that we want people to be doing.
And one of the side effects, a life-threatening anaphylaxis reaction, could be the side effect. Did the doctor establish whether it was the nasal spray which had caused the anaphylaxis?
No.
You just know that you had anaphylaxis after using it?
After using it, because the consultant in Fuerteventura Hospital said to me, what is it you did on holiday different this time round to all the other times you went on holiday? The only thing was that I took that spray, nothing else. I've never had an allergic reaction myself.
What would you say to people who think, right, I'm watching this now, but I quite like the idea of a nasal spray that gives me a tan? What would your stern warning be?
Just don't do it. Just don't do it. There is so many believable pictures and things advertised online, the before and afters. But what you have no idea about is it might not happen to your friends, but it might happen just to you, and that happened to me.
What would you say about these products?
I would say that melanotan 2 was actually stopped in clinical trials when it was being looked at because there were so many adverse effects. So people having reactions to it. We know that there may potentially be an increased risk of skin cancer, kidney damage. There is a reason why it's not available on the high street. So I would strongly discourage people from doing it.
Mm-hmm. Well, absolutely. It gives me the chills. I mean, anaphylaxis is an exceptionally serious condition. Yeah. You don't play fast and loose with that. So
it's so frightening. So
thank
frightening.
goodness you're OK, Edith.
Yes.
Thank you so much. And Dr. Emma Wedgeworth as well.
Treasury Minister James Murray has said the government reserves the right to retaliate against Donald Trump's 25% tariffs on all steel and aluminium imports to the US.
And he joins us now. Very good morning to you. Desperate morning for our steel industry. How do you deal with a problem like President Trump and tariffs?
Well, it's very disappointing that the US has imposed these tariffs on steel and aluminium. We're committed to championing open and free trade, and our response is going to be one of pragmatism and to continue negotiating rapidly for an economic agreement with the US with the potential to eliminate additional tariffs, because we know that that is in the best interest of British businesses and the British public. And of course, that negotiation toward an economic agreement with the US comes out of the Prime Minister's trip to Washington last month. The success of that trip was to make the negotiation for the economic agreement get underway. And so we want to make sure we continue with that negotiation now.
Sorry, can I just interrupt? We knew this was coming and we failed to stop it. And all you can say is you're disappointed.
No, look, the position we're in is that we are negotiating with the US rapidly towards an economic agreement, and that is the best way to support British businesses to get that economic deal with the US. So we need to respond with cool heads.
The EU's hit back with retaliation. Canada's hit back with retaliation. We're just going to say, oh, we're terribly disappointed about all this, and we'll just carry on chatting to you. It just doesn't sound like we're standing up for ourselves. And we knew this was in the pipeline. You have an industry that's worth $400 million in terms of our exports to the United States, and a whole load of steelworkers this morning at Port Talbot in Wales wondering if their jobs are going to get lost.
Well, in terms of supporting steel workers, we are absolutely committed to supporting the industry. We're supporting UK steel industry's application to the Trade Remedies Authority to ask them to look at whether further measures might be necessary to protect UK producers. But I'm also really clear that we're in a different position than other countries. We're in a different position than the EU, for instance. We're in a position where we have this rapid dialogue about securing an economic agreement that came out of the back of the Prime Minister's visit to Washington, D.C.
So
last
just
month.
briefly,
and that's the
can
right
I just...
way to support British businesses.
So we're not retaliating. Our language is staying at disappointed rather than furious, angry, upset. How soon do you think you can get this 25% tax on steel and going from the UK to US lifted?
I'm not going to speculate about when the economic agreement might come to fruition. But
do you have any confidence at all you'll get it
We are negotiating
sorted?
rapidly to make sure that that happens. And the only reason why we're having this negotiation about an economic agreement with the US is because of the Prime Minister's approach, because of his cool-headed, pragmatic approach, working closely and productively with the US. And that is in the best interests of British businesses. You know, I mean, UK businesses, steel producers don't want a trade war between the UK and the US. We need to make sure that we take the benefit of the cool-headed, pragmatic approach that we've had so far and continue these negotiations rapidly toward an economic agreement.
The problem is, James Murray, you've got a trade war. You're in the trade war, and at the moment you are under fire. Stock markets are down round the world. You desperately need growth in our economy. And the announcement you're making today is you are going to abolish the payments regulator. How's that going to help?
Well, the abolition of the payment systems regulator is just one example of where we want to make the system simpler for businesses. We want to get rid of unnecessary bureaucracy and make sure that businesses can invest and grow, because we know that economic growth is the way to put more money in people's pockets.
And how's it going to help growth?
Well, at the moment, businesses have been telling us that the landscape with the payment system regulator alongside the FCA and the Bank of England is too complicated. And we know that businesses want simplicity when they're thinking about where to invest and how to grow. We want to back businesses to do that growth, because that is how we put more money in people's pockets, make people better off.
So I read your press release this morning. The headline is "Regulator Axed as Red Tape is Slashed to Boost Growth." Then when you actually read it, it says, "Today's announcement does not result in any immediate changes to the payment systems regulator's remit or ongoing programme of work. The regulator will continue to have access to its statutory powers, and legislation is passed by Parliament to enact these changes." So it's not being abolished, it's staying. You're going to need primary legislation before it goes. Even then, it's just being merged into another regulator. You're not proposing any changes in the regulatory remit at all. I tell you, this will have absolutely zero impact on economic growth this year and next year. And your press release says it's axed as you slash regulation to boost growth. It's just not true.
The decision that the press release announces is to get rid of the PSR, the Payment Systems Regulator.
It says you're going to boost growth. It says is slashed to boost growth. And then it says it's not being slashed. In fact, it's staying. There's going to be no boost to growth.
Well, look, Ed, you'll remember from your time in government that people make decisions, ministers make decisions, and then we have to get the legislation in place to put those decisions into place.
I tell you what I remember, Minister, which is if you have a press release and you've been put on the TV to talk about it, make sure you read page 2, because page 1 says you've abolished the regulator to boost growth, and page 2 says you've not abolished the regulator. It's staying until you've got primary legislation. Even then, the remit's not changing. It'll have no impact on growth at all. It's just made up.
No, look, I think it's really clear that we have taken the decision to abolish the regulator.
When?
We're going to then make the legislation. We're going to then set out the detail over summer as a result of the consultation about how to implement it. And then we're going to bring forward the legislation to merge its functions where appropriate with the Financial Conduct Authority.
This year?
Well, it depends on when the legislation gets through Parliament. But
so when it says regulator
to
acts to boost growth, it's not axed, and there's no chance of it happening this year, and therefore you're not going to boost growth this year, are you?
No, look, what businesses have been telling us, Ed, is that they want a simpler system. They want us to get rid of the unnecessary bureaucracy when they're engaging with regulators. And in this space in particular, the payment system regulator, it is a real problem for businesses in terms of the complexity. And so we are committing today to getting rid of that regulator, to doing it in a way that will be determined through the consultation over summer and the legislation that comes off the back of that. But this is something which makes it simpler for businesses. We want to back businesses to have a simple way to engage with regulators so that they can invest and grow, because by investing to grow, we can then put more money in people's pockets.
OK, I'm going to ask you about something entirely different, but it is an issue that is exercising our viewers this morning. You will know that yesterday another defendant refused to appear in court to hear victim impact statements and to hear his sentencing directly. Meanwhile, Cheryl Corbell, who is the mother of a 9-year-old girl who was murdered, whose killer also refused to come to court, says that the proposal to add time to someone's sentence, which I believe is currently in the King's Speech, is meaningless, especially for someone with a very long or a whole life term. Would the government consider withdrawing visitation rights? I know this isn't your area, but I'm sure you've been briefed on this morning because it is such a visceral issue for people.
It's such a horrific issue that we're dealing with here in terms of the crimes that were committed, but also to add to how horrific the crimes are, the then emotional and devastating impact of the criminals, of the people who are being prosecuted, then not looking their victims' families in the eyes is just horrific, and we need to change that. And so you mentioned there about the proposal to add time to a criminal's sentence if they refuse to appear in court. That's a backstop. There's a lot more that we want to do ahead of that. You know, what we want to do is change the law to make it absolutely clear that judges can compel, can force defendants to come to court, to look their victims' families in the eyes. We want to make sure that reasonable force can be used to make sure that that happens. And if for any reason there's a technical reason why the defendant can't then appear in court, we want to make sure there are other solutions. So whether that's a video screen so that the criminal has to look at the victim's family's testimonies in the eye, they have to confront it. You know, what we need to get away from here is the idea that criminals, when they're being prosecuted, can avoid that eye-to-eye contact, can avoid, you know, bringing that important moment for victims' families of seeing the criminal in the dock and seeing them, you know, facing justice. And so we will do everything possible to change that, you know, whether that is reasonable force, whether that's video screens in the criminal's cell, you know, whether that's, as you said, a backstop of having extra time added to a sentence. But this would all be put through the new Victims Bill, which we'll be publishing in the coming months.
OK. Thank you very much indeed. I'm sure campaigners will take some heart from those words. The Exchequer Secretary, James Murray. Thanks for your time this morning.